coordinator of counseling here. And we've been having college night for several years here. We took a little break and then we started doing it again, I think 3 or 4 years ago. Our goal tonight is that you leave here with a better understanding of the ins and outs and ups and downs of the college search and application process, as well as some practical advice. We also hope that you will leave knowing that we're going to be here for you through this task, which sometimes seems daunting, and that you feel supported and you know it's all going to be okay. We are going to help you put your best foot forward when it's time to actually apply, and we're going to guide you through to the end until you found a great match. And a great match in a place where you'll start your last ramp to that real world I'm sure you've been hearing about for a while. When I say we, I'm talking about our guidance department. Most of them are here today. I just want to introduce you to our counselors up in front. We have Ashley Martinez. We have Rob Adams, Laura Huron, Rob Schwartz, Lainey Lichtenstein, Jen Lichtman, Greg Cuddy, and so these guys come every year because there's little nuances, things that are going to change from year to year. So trends and policies in college admissions do change to change a little bit each year. And what colleges will be looking for from year to year is going to depend on their institutional goals and demands that year too. So it's good that you're here. You can hear what might be new happening out there. I'm going to introduce you to our college panelists in a little bit. They're going to talk to you about their particular institutions and what makes a good candidate in their eyes. In addition, they're going to offer you some good advice for making this process as successful as it can be for you. So the college process. First, I want to say, try not to worry. It's all going to work out. It can be a little unsettling for some of you going through this process, knowing that this might be the first time that you students or you parents of the students are really not in a situation of any control. When the applications are submitted, it's all up to the colleges, right? So what we're going to do is get you prepared to put your best foot forward. But also remember, your peers throughout the country are a lot like you. Stop thinking you're going to make a huge mistake. You're not going to make a huge mistake. We will tell you if you're making a huge mistake. Just know that everybody's out there doing their best and nobody's perfect. And I think colleges, the representatives will tell you that perfection is not necessarily what they're looking for. Okay? Parents, please understand that the child you have sitting next to you now is not the child who's going to leave here in a year or two. It's going to be a lot that they go through between now and graduation. And you're just going to see so much growth. You see an awful lot of growth in the senior year, from the start and finish to the actual college application process. Students have to wrestle with what happens if I get in, what happens if I don't get in. Should I apply to other schools? I didn't visit that one, maybe that's the one for me. There's going to be a lot of questioning, and the questioning is not a bad thing. It's going to help them to really try to figure out what their values are, who they are, what they're looking for. Students, we do encourage you to make this a journey not just of college exploration, but self-exploration. You're going to have to really think about your priorities, how you spend your time. You're going to have to keep your grades up. You might have to hold down a job. You're going to have to probably think about the timeline for senior year. You can apply early. And let's not forget your social lives and your relationships and prom. Things like that. There's going to be a lot going on in your head. So again, you're going to become more frequent visitors to us in the guidance office. Mom and Dad, we hope to be seeing more of you as well. And feel free to reach out when you're wondering, is this okay? I urge you, students, to start thinking about who you really are and what your definition of success is. And more somber questions. How do you react to setback? where do you go when you think you need some help? Are you an independent person? Do you take initiative? Do you follow through on your ideas? How do you react to criticism? We want you to be successful adults more than anything, and pondering these questions is going to help you grow. We want you to be ready when it's time to go. In order to really wrestle with some of these questions, I hate to say it, but you're going to have to unplug. You know, we've all become used to being connected to some device, watching, listening, talking, and you need the time to just sit. You know, maybe sit in the car and watch the trees go by. Maybe lay in the grass, watch the stars. Whatever it is, don't forget that's important time too. Remember to unplug and have a good time with it. Be creative. Parents, please listen to your children. Let them become decision makers. After all, soon enough, they're going to have to make a lot of decisions on their own. We're also learning that people who feel like they have very little control over their lives develop high levels of anxiety and sometimes depression. So it's a negative byproduct of us being super parents, right? Our kids are a little less independent and willing to go out on a limb and solve problems for themselves. We forget this. It's difficult, but we have to let them try to grow. Let them struggle while they're still here with you. A person doesn't know how resilient they are until they're challenged and come out the other side okay. If we don't let our kids struggle or have accomplishments on their own, we're robbing of them of that satisfaction and knowledge that they're capable. Parents, finally, I urge you, and students, parents and students, I urge you to talk to people, friends, family members, mentors, employers, people that you've met and you respect. Talk to them about how they got to where they are. Listen to their stories. Think about the reasons you respect them and the qualities they have. Then try to remember if you've ever heard them say, you know, I will always regret never taking the SAT for the third time. You're not going to hear that. Or, my life would be completely different if I just took AP US History. I knew I should have taken that class. No, that's not going to happen. Rather, successful leaders are people we look up to, have taken advantage of opportunities. They're resilient, they think out of the box, and they know who they are. I urge you to believe that although it's our focal point tonight and throughout most of your high school career, where you go to college is going to have very little to do with ultimately who you become as a person. We hope you find a college where you feel at home, surrounded by good people, and people who inspire you. We want you to be somewhere where you do well and feel confident enough to take advantage of the opportunities that come your way, or better yet, make your own opportunities. We hope you go somewhere you'll feel that will allow you to continue your quest to become the best that you can be. And I promise you, it has very little to do with your GPA and your SAT scores. So if that was a little too idealistic for you, I have some good hard data I can show you. At the end of each year, we survey our seniors just as they're about to graduate, and we ask them a lot of questions, and it gives us very good feedback. But 65% of the graduates last year were accepted into their first choice college. The year before it was 72%. I imagine it'll stay about the same as years go on. 57 received some sort of merit award, and the year before 60%. So that's free money you don't have to give back that colleges award you for just being really a standout in their applicant pool. 85% last year said they were very satisfied with the college they'd be attending, and that's the highest rating we allow them to give. And then it drops down to 13% satisfied, which is supposed to be satisfied, and 1.7 not very satisfied, and 0 not at all satisfied. And the numbers are similar to the year before. That's just to give you a framework how things will turn out. It's, you know, you rarely get a class that really gets everything they want out of the process. But what we want you to do is know that you're going to be valuable in many different places, and as long as you're open and not stuck on one school and open to a handful, you're going to be fine. And if that was not inspiring, and if anything I said makes you think, I want to know more, these are some really great books that are being passed around from parent to parent, from our networks with college admissions counselors and other counselors. The first one, How to Raise an Adult, is by a professor at Stanford University and also a mom. It's really good about talking about how to raise a child who is resilient, who understands they have a lot going on. The Self-Driven Child is written by a neuropsychologist and a therapist. They're both parents, and they both tell you that they were both children at some point. And they start talking a lot about where does the anxiety come from that our kids are feeling, and the autonomy they need to grow. And Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be is written by Frank Bruni, and you've probably seen articles in the New York Times. He's been writing about college admissions for years. We're going to move on with the evening, and in no particular order, I would like to introduce our wonderful panelists who have given their free evening time to come be here with you and to really help you get a better understanding of what's going to be happening in the next few years. J.C. Tassone, Director of Admissions at Vassar College. Would you like to come up first? Everybody else will come up too. Amparo Silva.
I asked for my entrance music to be played, but I guess we couldn't get that working.
Many details. Sorry. Amparo Silva, and she's from Syracuse University. We have Jackie Christopher. She's from University of Roehampton in the UK. Sarah Zoll, who's at Purdue University. Deborah Johns from Yale University. And Craig Broccoli, last but not least, from Suny Binghamton.
Most of you are in New York. We all are in New York. You know, Binghamton's part of the State University of New York, so it's a huge system. I actually graduated from Binghamton not terribly long ago. I'm based here in the New York City, Metro New York City area for Binghamton as part of our admissions team. And Binghamton's one of the university research centers in the SUNY system. So mid-sized public university, 14,000 students. We err more on the selective side, which many of you probably already know. 3 hours from here means we're a residential college where we have a lot of students living there. All of our first-year students are on campus, living in little communities. As a research school, we have a research going on in all 6 different colleges, the engineering, business, the liberal arts, and the sciences. So there's a lot of choices going on up there. Now, just in terms of the type of student we look for, and I think we all look for great academic fits, but it stretches a bit beyond that, of course, too, right? Who is that right student? And we're looking for very value-driven, curious students at Binghamton, but those that are much more on the collaborative end versus, say, the competitive end, just fitting in with that true student body that comes in from all over the world. We have students from all 50 states, 120 countries, certainly a whole lot from New York.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Deb Johns. I'm Associate Director of Admissions at Yale University. You may have heard of it. It's in New Haven, Connecticut. It is one of 8 institutions which are part of the Ivy League, which is the sports league. Probably maybe knew that or did not know that. Undergraduate, which is Yale College, is about 6,000 students. We have over 85 majors, and our students come from 50 states and over 85 different countries around the world. And we too have lots of research and lots of opportunity at Yale. It is a liberal arts institution first and foremost, but we do have majors in humanities, the social sciences, and any kind of STEM discipline, most STEM disciplines that you can imagine. What we look for, what is the student that I find intriguing when I read? I would say, first which most of our students who apply are, versus intellectual. And that's actually what we're looking for, is the student who is coming across more intellectually curious. That's really, really important to us, and especially to me as I read students. Students that are sort of crazy curious and passionate about lots of different things. They're the kid that can go off on tangents about very random intellectual stuff that you never really knew about, but boy, you're going to know about in the next hour or so. And so those kids sort of intrigue us as well. I liked how Kathy talked about resilient. We actually do like to see students who have showcased resiliency, who do not need to be perfect nor feel that they can't really handle failure, because we really want them to be able to handle failure well, gracefully, and maturely. We want them to be confident, but we do not want them to be arrogant. We want them to be other-centered as well. We are, first and foremost, a community of scholars, and so we want our students to be able to get along with one another. We're going to have a lot of high-achieving students from all around the world in small spaces with lots of resources. It's really important that they appreciate each other's differences and what they bring to the table, but that they're also very confident about sharing those experiences with others, and that's important to us as well. So I'll stop right there.
Hey everyone, my name is Sarah Zolan here from Purdue University. Purdue is out in West Lafayette, Indiana, probably about a 13 or so hour drive from here, which I would not recommend doing. An easier 90-minute flight from JFK or Newark. Purdue is a large public institution. We have about 40,000 undergraduate students, over 200 majors in 11 undergraduate colleges. Of those colleges and majors, our College of Engineering is by far our largest and typically most popular for our undergraduate applicants. We have some great programs in computer science and cybersecurity. We have a professional flight program, so if any of you are interested in becoming professional pilots, we have an airport right on campus. You can actually fly the president of the university around, no pressure. Fun fact about Purdue, yesterday or 2 days ago was the 10th anniversary of the Miracle on the Hudson. Sully Sullenberger landing the plane on the Hudson River. He is actually a Purdue alum. So some great history there at the university. We have students, again, from all 50 states and about 130 different countries on campus. We are a public institution, but only about 35% or so of our students are Indiana residents. So students coming from all over the country to study at Purdue. And when we're looking at our applicants, again, looking for highly qualified students, but also students who are bringing something different to the table. We have students who have done research and great internships and have studied abroad in high school, whatever it might be. We are looking at you as an individual, and we want to see how you can add to the community and the life at Purdue. We're also looking for that resilience, for that grit. The president of Purdue actually wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post about 2 months ago about grit. So that's something that's very valued to us in the application process. What have you overcome? Have you had challenges? What do you do with a setback? So that's something that we're definitely talking about a lot in our office, but also looking for as we're reading applications.
Hi, my name is Jackie Christopher. I'm with the University of Roehampton in London. And yes, we are based in London. We are southwest of London, so we're about 30 minutes away from the center of London, about 20 minutes away from Heathrow. We have about 9,000 students on campus, 176 nationalities on campus. So we're very diverse, but we still have that beautiful British feel to our campus. If you're looking to study internationally, definitely come and see me. I actually did my bachelor's and master's degree in the UK,
happy to be here tonight for several reasons. So let me elaborate a little. One is, first of all, I want to say to Kathy that her presentation really shared a lot of wisdom with you about what the college selection process is going to be like and what you should be expecting, and that you should probably relax a little bit because you're going to learn a lot tonight from all of us, and you have the resources here at the high school. I do live in the National Mamaroneck community, so I'm from here. Yay. And I have a sister who's a teacher here at Mamaroneck. Some of you may have her.
Miss Lisa.
I have a nephew who graduated from Mamaroneck. We attended Syracuse, and we love all the experiences and all the science. And I also have a nephew who is a freshman here. He's not here tonight. He hears from me all the time, so I think it's so one of the first things that I want to share with you is how many of you are a little bit nervous about the college selection process? Can I see some hands? Okay. And it is normal, right? You should be. So the situation with the college selection process is that even if you've gone through it once before or twice before, it's always challenging because every student is a little different, as Kathy said. So I encourage you to allow the students to work with the counseling community, to do the things that they have to do the research, and you are going to find a place that is perfect for you. So you need not worry about whether or not you're going to be successful or whether or not you are going to be in the place that you want to be. I graduated from college unlike Mr. Broccoli a long time ago, but I do remember being in your shoes, and I do remember the stress and the tension and having to think about, because I thought that at 17 years old I had to know exactly what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And that is far from what you should be worried about right now. If you are undecided, do not worry. You are going to be able to find a university that is going to fit you and that is going to help you to reach that point where you're going to feel comfortable with getting a career that you're happy with. And I want you to know that you will find a place that will make you successful. And as Kathy said, it doesn't matter where you go to school. It's going to be what you get out of that education and what you get out of that institution. As you know, I work for Syracuse University. Syracuse is a private school in central upstate New York. We are cold, as you know, and we're really well known for a lot of things besides sports. We're really well known for a lot of things besides sports. I always say Syracuse is the perfect place for students who know what they want to do, but it's also the perfect place for students who are not quite sure of what they're going to do. We have 9 divisions at the university. We have what we call professional colleges and also pre-professional options. We range from a school of architecture, which is one of the best in the country and world renowned. We're also really well known for our school of public communications, business. We're known for our school of art, etc., etc., etc. One of the jewels at Syracuse that is not really well known is the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs. For those students who may be interested in careers in social sciences, political sciences, diplomacy, etc., make sure that you look up the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs. It's amazing. Clearly, I bleed orange. I've been with Syracuse for about 33 years, and I wish I had my glasses on because when I say 33 years, some eyebrows go up, right? And I'm wondering what you're thinking. I always say I started when I was 12, but no, that would not be legal. So I started a little later. But the amazing opportunities at Syracuse are there for all the students who may be interested in coming to our university. We also have study abroad programs. We have internship opportunities. We have community service projects. 49% of our students actually do a study abroad program. And I hope that all of you are interested in doing study abroad or studying abroad. One of the things we value at Syracuse is we value true diversity. And I mean not just ethnic diversity, we value diversity. Our students have different interests. They come from over 120 countries. We have students from everywhere in the United States, including Hawaii, Alaska, and some of the states where we may have just a few applicants, but we have them from everywhere in the United States. And one of the things that we value at Syracuse is, as everyone has said, students who are not only competitive academically, but students who are able to show us a different side of them. Those qualities that are not measurable, right? Which are personal qualities, things that we call soft skills. Make sure you develop all those soft skills are going to be really important. There are a lot of competitive students, but keep in mind that universities are now selective as well. Put your best foot forward. There's no secret ingredient to get into a university. There are lots of surprises, as Kathy said. So the only thing you can do is stay very close to us. I do recommend that. So if you're interested in any of our institutions, make sure you stay very close to an admissions person. It doesn't have to be me, but it could be somebody else from Syracuse. And make sure that you're always in contact, because interest plays a big part on you getting admitted or not. There are other things that play as well. And I'm going to leave those for the panel, because I'm sure we're going to get those questions. Thank you.
I'm J.C. Stone from Vassar College in Poughkeepsie. I hope you folks up in the balcony got a discount on the ticket tonight. Did you? Yeah. So Vassar is in Poughkeepsie, New York. We're about an hour and a half or so. I anticipate it takes me to get home this evening, so about an hour and a half north of here. Our campus is on an incredibly beautiful 1,000 acres. If you've never come to see Vassar, you would love the campus. Our student body is completely undergraduate. So we're in a completely undergraduate liberal arts college. The size of our student body is 2,500, which, believe it or not, makes us one of the bigger small liberal arts colleges. So 2,500 students all studying for the bachelor degree. One of the more interesting features of our experience is that Vassar is an open curriculum school, which, if that's a term you're not familiar with, means that we don't have course requirements. So students choose their own academic program. In terms of what we're looking for in the admissions process, Vassar is looking for high-achieving students who are interesting people, who are going to be comfortable living and learning in an environment where there's a tremendous amount of independence and a tremendous amount of individual expression on our campus.
We haven't talked about the actual college application yet. And, you know, part of it's pretty mundane: your name, your address, your parents' names, where they went to school, yada, yada, yada. Then it gets to essays. Then you have to attach your transcript, your records from high school, test scores perhaps, and essays. So I want to ask the panelists, if they can, give us an idea of how their particular school looks at the application and what's most important to them.
We're on planet Earth, and this is, so in terms of the application, we all, in some cases, see thousands of applications, well, I think we all see thousands of applications come through, meaning that every single application, although it is a number, is a different story, in that there's a whole lot going on. And that's where I think we all find some fun in our job, trying to figure out where those stories really come into play and what, in all of our institutions, what makes the most sense for our schools. You know, I'll say Binghamton being a fairly large public institution, there's a lot of different things we're balancing, in particular in the state that we even live in and where everybody's coming from. Academics is at the forefront of this, and this is probably going to be something echoed throughout this. It's important because we're trying to make sure that if we're saying yes to a student, it's not just because we like you, we hopefully like all of you that we say yes to, but we also think you're going to fit in and graduate from our school. But the biggest decision is we want to make sure that you're going to be there come sophomore year, because if you're there sophomore year, graduating is not that big of a challenge at that point. So meaning we want to retain you. And a lot of that has to do with your academic fit. And there's a whole lot of thought that goes into what that means, how our class of students fit together. So the transcript part tends to shine the brightest in this. And maybe there's a story in your transcript, and I would say there probably is in every single student's transcript where everything is coming from and where your grades have gone over the years. Sometimes straight A's, sometimes a bumpy road, sometimes not such a great trend towards the end of junior year. But there's something in that we're going to look into. And oftentimes we're going to mirror that with other pieces of the academic puzzle, and that often tends to be testing and how that might reflect on another side of your academic base. But this is grounded in that notion of, is this the right fit for you to thrive with other students? So I want to make that clear. It's not about who's the best of the numbers, but knowing who we're bringing in, how do we look at your performance and trying to find that right match? And I'll just say this kind of clearly for the students out there who might think about this in more than just a first year getting into a school. At a place like Binghamton, 30%, a third of our students, which is about 1,000 students each year, are students we see as transfer students. Some of those students, actually a good chunk of those students, are somebody I've seen before. We're trying to find where that trajectory is. So there's more than one path in many cases, but it still comes down to that academic climate and that fit. So I'll leave it at that side. For Binghamton, that is a huge piece of it.
So you know when I mentioned what we look for in terms of first that intellectual curiosity, and Kathy mentioned the application having, you know, transcript and common application or coalition application or QuestBridge application, and then the recommendations and essays and you know, college school counselor recommendation and testing and such. So in terms of the intellectual curiosity, we get that from various places. You might think that it's just from the transcript and testing, and that's all well and good, but we want to see, well, how is that student pushing themselves in terms of their rigor, what they can and what they have decided to take in high school. So rigor in terms of intellectual curiosity, that sort of plays in. But then we want to also see, that also comes into the way that they express themselves about the topics that they choose to write about, in the way that we ask them to present themselves in our essay, in our application. Because many of us have additional questions past the application that are specific to our institution. We call them Yale questions, and it might be, you know, XYZ college questions. And those questions are very intentional in the things that we're looking for. And again, that will give us some intellectual curiosity. Your teachers talk about that. They talk about how you engage with the topics in your class. And we look for that through the way that your teachers present you through their letters of recommendation. And that's helpful to us. And the way that you engage with the people that you might interview, because you would interview 9 times out of 10 here if you apply to Yale. Then in terms of community engagement, we can see that in lots of places. We're going to definitely see it through the school counselor recommendation. How do they interact with Mamaroneck? How they interact with where they're from? How they interact with their family? Are there outside communities that they engage with? And how do they do that? How is that happening for them? How do they engage as a community member, citizen-like, in the classroom? The teachers tell us a little bit. What they choose to talk about in their essays, that will showcase some of their community engagement. So there's lots of places. When we talk about reading holistically or for the whole person, you probably have read an awful lot about that this fall, we're looking for pieces of that puzzle through lots of different types of documents that we're reviewing as part of the application process. So, you know, that's also part of it. And then other-centeredness, you know, do you play well with others in the classroom? How do you engage in your extracurricular activities? How do you present yourself through your extracurricular activities? Do you have to lead everything? Or are you comfortable being both a leader and a member? Do you persist through those activities? Do you have a variety of those activities? And those kinds of things also are showcased through the way that you present your extracurricular activities, the way that you present things in other spaces throughout your application, and so those would be things that would come to play. So when we talk about it, we may talk later about this in terms of taking time to sort of think about how you're going to present these various aspects of yourself. You don't sort of, you know, the application is due on November 1st, so heck, I got to get on this on October 15th. You'd be way behind the 8 ball, no matter what, if you're trying to think about how best to present yourself as a smart, engaged person who can add to a community and also get as much from that community because you've chosen well in terms of your list of colleges. So that's that.
So when you apply to Purdue, the most important piece to your application is going to be your academic history, like Dave mentioned. So we're looking not just at your GPA, and honestly, when I read applications, I don't even look at your GPA. We still look at your grades, but we're looking at you based on an individual, where you are coming from, what high school you have gone to, what classes are offered at your high school, what opportunities have you had, and what have you taken advantage of. So when you apply to any school, your counselors will send a school profile. So that's how we on the admission side know what your high school is like, how many AP classes are offered, is there a cap on AP classes, how many students go into 4-year schools, 2-year schools. So we are looking at you in context of your environment, what you've been exposed to, what you've taken advantage of. Purdue is in the Midwest, like I mentioned, so we have students coming from some pretty rural areas whose high schools don't offer any AP classes or IB classes. So they can't take them. That is not held against them in the application process. So we're really looking at students holistically as individuals based on where you are coming from. But we're also looking for any of that other information that you can provide us in the application. So your essays, we at Purdue also have 2 short answer questions of why Purdue and why your major. For a lot of students, those questions or your answers become much more important to us in the application process than the longer Common App essay that you're probably stressing over, for 6 months to a year as you're applying to college. Those 2 short answer questions can play a much more significant role in our review process. Anything that is important to you is probably going to be important to us in the application process. So if you have gone to 4 different high schools in the course of high school, or you had mono and broke your leg at the same time junior year and you were out of school for 2 months, tell us that. Your grades probably went down a little bit during that time. If you don't tell us, then we're going to see you've gone from all A's to B's and C's, and if we don't have that information that you were sick and at home asleep, we'll just think that maybe your classes got a little bit more challenging and that's why your grades went down. So truly, anything that you send into us during the application process is going to get added to your application. It is going to be considered. It does not mean you have to send us your artwork from kindergarten. It does not mean if we require 2 letters of recommendation, you have to send us 50. But anything that you think will help us get to know you more, especially at a larger school like Purdue where we don't offer interviews and we don't track demonstrated interest. You might not be able to come out to Indiana to visit. We might not get to visit your high school. Anything that you can send us in that will help us get to know you and hopefully read your application in a more positive light are things that I would definitely recommend submitting as you go through the process.
So remember when I was telling you guys that bachelor's degrees in England and Wales is 3 years, right? So just to give you some history, the reason for that is because you're going directly into the program. You're not doing any prerequisites for general ed classes. You're going directly into a major. So for example, creative writing, right? You're only doing creative writing classes. You'll never have to do math, science, or anything like that. So what we look for, and most UK universities, the most important is AP exams and SAT subject tests in the related field that you want to study. The reason for that is we want to make sure that you are confident and you really are passionate about the subject and interested and have an idea before going in, because once you go into the program, you can't switch your major. You can, but you're going to have to start all over again the next year. So this is really for the type of student who knows what they want to study. If you're not sure, but you still want to, dabble around with a few other, subjects, and Scotland might be the better option. But with all UK universities, it's very, very important. I can't stress this enough. Very important AP exams or SAT subject tests. That's going to really make it or break your application with most universities. With the University of Roehampton, we're a little bit more flexible. All universities look at essays, recommendations, but the majority of UK universities, extracurricular activities aren't that important. Volunteer service isn't really that important. That's not going to make or break your application. So, like I said, academics are very, very strong when it comes to our application process.
So I have to echo everything that has been said so far. As a U.S. institution, we also use the same methods, the same tactics, and so forth. I do have to add something to that, though. There are some of you who are going to be applying specifically to particular majors that may require any special training or any special talent or any special classes. So let me give you an example. For students who are going to be applying to a school of business, or to our school of business in particular, then clearly your math has to be optimum, right? You have to have taken calculus and so forth and so on. If you say to us that you are going to apply to our School of Architecture, we are a professional division in architecture, so you have to prepare a portfolio. Many of you I know may be interested in art programs or in our Conservatory of Music or in being an actor or a dancer. Those students have to submit auditions and portfolios. So aside from the fact that we are going to look at everything that everyone has mentioned in the same way, we are also looking for fit in terms of what your career option and choice is. If you're applying to the College of Arts and Sciences, that someone who's just really well-rounded and has all the requirements is going to be okay. But if you're prepping to do careers in architecture, engineering, computer science, information technology, if you're prepping to be artists, actors, musicians, etc., then make sure that you are enhancing those skills, that you're taking classes, that you're preparing, and that you're already working on portfolios and auditions. That's going to be really important.
Demonstrated interest is the concept where some universities are going to give preferential treatment or extra bonus points, or whatever phrasing you want to use, to students that are demonstrating interest in their university. Right? And some universities have very complicated schemes where you get a certain amount of points for visiting the campus, certain amount of points for emailing the admissions rep, a certain amount of points for doing an interview, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are a lot of different ways where you might be able to demonstrate interest. I would tell you that there's probably a pretty big degree of difference in the way different schools do that. For instance, Vassar doesn't track demonstrated interest, so you don't need to email me. Emailing me is not going to in any way help your chances for admission. If you have a question, great. Otherwise, it's not doing anything for you. The only way you can demonstrate interest in Vassar is by applying early decision. So that is one thing that we do. We give preference to students that apply early decision.
So this is really important because a lot of students, in fact, I had a student from Puerto Rico contact me today and said, when are we going to get our financial aid package on early action? We don't even have early action. So let me explain what the difference is. Early decision is a process through which you would apply to an institution, and I recommend for students who have seen the institution, who have explored their possibilities, who are in agreement with their family and they're comfortable with applying early, it is binding. So that means that if you apply early decision, typically those deadlines are early in the year, and I'm going to generalize. Typically about November 1st or November 15th, some institutions may be a little different. Also keep in mind, please, that every institution is different. So what we're telling you here may apply to us, and it may not apply to somebody else. So keep that in mind all the time. So that's early decision, it is binding. So if you say that you are going to come to our institutions, you will have to come to our institutions. And you sign a contract, your counselor signs a contract, and your parents also sign. And it is it's a word of honor, right? Because I don't think that if anybody doesn't come early decision, we send out the FBI to get you. But it's ugly, because then Kathy is going to look like she's being irresponsible because she's allowing someone to do early decision who's not going to come. So what you do is you sever relationships among universities and counselors and so forth. Early action, it's a way in which many universities you're able to apply to many universities now. Early action is non-binding, but not everyone has that. That means that you will get an admissions decision as soon as possible, but you are not in any way obligated to go to that institution. You just know early, so that's very comfortable. So those institutions who have that, wonderful, take advantage of those and do it, because it takes a lot from the stress that you're going through, and you already know early. And then the other one is regular decision, is what almost everybody does. It has a deadline typically, sometimes it doesn't. Some schools are rolling, some schools have different deadlines. So make sure that you check with each institution what they offer, what the deadlines are, and when would they reply to you. So we have early decision, Syracuse has early decision and regular decision. We unfortunately do not have early action.
We have something that is called restrictive early action. We call it a nice thing. We call it single choice early action. We can only apply to us and no other place early, either early decision or early action. And there are a few schools that have a restrictive early action program where they ask you not to apply other places, but you can still apply. Each college or university has sort of caveats on what that means specifically. And I'll also say in terms of demonstrated interest, that is something that you should pay close attention to, sophomores and juniors. When you go onto their website, colleges and universities are pretty clear about what's important to them in terms of coming to visit and getting an interview and being on campus. And there are lots of institutions who pay attention to how you interact with them. You know, coming to their high school visits when they come to visit Mamaroneck. Sometimes that's also tracked. So you want to find that nice balance of showing genuine interest towards institutions that you genuinely would like to go to, but not stalking them. And that is something that people will notice after a time, is if they get kind of constant, wow, there's Susie again with another email telling me about another award that they've received. I mean, today I read an applicant. We have a place where people can send us updates, and I noticed as I opened up the file that the person had sent us 93 updates. Big, huge red flag. Big, huge, right there. And I thought, I can only imagine what these 93 pages, because everyone is an individual update. And I thought, okay. And we do not track demonstrated interest at all. And so I think that that's something I find curious. But I think that those are things that you can see and seek out right now as you're doing your early research about universities, because, you know, I have a senior son who's gone through this process and now is mostly in the mode of choosing which school he'll attend next year, and I have a sophomore daughter who's in college. And I think for her, we've done a good job of figuring out which places it mattered and which places it didn't really matter. And I think that's part of the homework that you can do now as a sophomore and junior in high school, to sort of see, and then plotting out these visits, which will take a lot of time, in terms of what's best. What's always best is visiting the campus, getting an interview, and being, you know, boots on the ground on the campus. That always will demonstrate the most genuine and bona fide interest in any institution.
Testing is, in some colleges, a huge piece. In some colleges, it doesn't even exist in their review process. I'll say at Binghamton, we do certainly look at the testing component. It's secondary, of course, in the academic view to what your overall performance here at Mamaroneck looks like. And that goes into the rigor, and that goes into what you're doing and how you're taking on a challenge and navigating those challenges. But the testing side, and even back to the original point in the beginning, it is one of those things that I tend to bucket in with demonstrated interest, applying early, the strategies, the gaming part of the, if I could just get this number to work out, I'll get a yes. And there's a lot of people out in the community out there that tend to know somebody who knows somebody, has the tips on what goes in. And testing gets lumped into there. Testing is important, but it's important to show on a national level, in a relatively unfair way, who can ace this particular style of studying and preparing and getting through an obstacle, in this case, be it a test, SAT, ACT, subject test, if that's the case. Super scoring is a tool used by many colleges, not all, of looking at a student and their best combination of scores. If they took the SAT twice, there's two parts to the SAT, right? Combining the two parts of the highest level. So you would submit all your scores to the college. We want to report the highest scores possible. We're going to look at you at your highest level. Same thing, in some cases, the ACT is super scored by colleges. Not all colleges. Well, they'll look at the components of the ACT. If you took it more than once, they'll put together your highest composite score. It's a good question if you're curious to ask a college, do they super score, and how does that play into your admissions process? But testing for bigger public is going to be a piece of it, and a pretty significant piece.
Yeah, and I'll send it down in just a second. And I apologize because I wear both hats. So we require testing at Yale, and we probably always will in some way, shape, or form. But again, it's one of my colleagues mentioned the context piece. And so the context for standardized testing, we do a lot of research and we know what it means to us in terms of the students that we admit, but we also know when students are soft testers, there's a lot of reasons for that. It could be socioeconomic, it could be background, it could be school context, not necessarily Mamaroneck, but it could be that. So there's lots of reasons why people might not get that middle 50% or whatever. I will say, both of my children applied to schools that do not require standardized testing. We did test optional pretty exclusively for both my kids. It was a healthier way for them to apply. There's over 1,000 institutions in the United States. You can go to a place called fairtest.org. You know, my daughter applied to 11 schools and got into 8. The 3 she didn't get into was where she had to gave them the test. My son has applied to 5, has gotten into 4, has not shown a test anywhere. So it's an option, especially for kids who that may not be what you want them to focus their attention on. You may want them to focus attention on other things.
So what I was going to say is, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have those awful exams, right? The SATs, the ACTs, etc. But we're not, and a lot of institutions still rely on those exams. There are lots of conversations in many places about becoming test optional. One of the things you will see is that many institutions are now test optional. But in many situations, the test scores are going to drive the possibility of a scholarship. At least that is the case in the case of Syracuse. And so prepare for those exams, do the best you can. Don't let them torture you, because there are students that are excellent students and they simply do not test well. It's just a fact. And if you're one of those, don't worry about it. Explain it somewhere. Your counselor can also explain it. But it also brings me to another topic, and I hope I'm not getting off the topic completely. One of the things that you are going to start feeling, the students, is that when you start taking the exams and you start applying to colleges, it's early now, but in your senior year, one of the things you are going to experience, which brings a lot of anxiety, is that you're going to start hearing from students who are already getting into colleges, who are bragging about their test scores, who are bragging about their whole lives, right? One of the things that you will find is there's a lot of misinformation. You cannot predict anything. You should not assume anything, and don't compare yourself to anyone at all. Every student is different, every institution is different, and there's no consistency from the colleges in many, many aspects. So if you talk to students and you look at all the students who apply to Syracuse University, and you start comparing grades and SATs and achievements and so forth, I think you would go crazy. Because some students may get in because they're a little stronger in some aspects that were important in their particular application, and some students may not get in because they may not have some of those requirements that we want. So don't make those assumptions, because trust me, when you get to senior year and you start hearing all of this, it causes a lot of anxiety. So don't worry about that. Talk to the experts. Don't listen to everybody and anybody. There's a lot of misinformation about that.
So special talents and legacy. So I would say that there's, in terms of assessing an application, you've heard from a number of people already that the academic component is typically going to be the more important side. But then for the most competitive universities, there are lots and lots of students that have very strong academic profiles. And then the who gets chosen oftentimes comes down to the personal side of the application. What the student is able to offer the campus, what things they have on their resume. And there's kind of a myth out there that colleges are looking for well-rounded students. Truth is, colleges don't want well-rounded students. Colleges want students with very sharp edges that are very talented at particular things. Colleges want the kid who's going to be drafted by the NFL. Colleges want the kid who's going to be the first seat cello in their orchestra, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is that students with those extreme talents are kind of few and far between. So most of the students that are applying to competitive universities don't have sort of nationally renowned talent in a particular area. They have maybe more local talent in their particular high school or their particular community, and they're finding ways in their application to get that across, right? To show where they've been able to contribute in their small world that might therefore then translate to something that goes on a college campus. But if you're a student that has very high level talent, be that in athletics, be that in the arts, or be that in some other area, Those are things that are going to be an asset for you in the admissions process. And you're going to want to find a way to make sure that gets across. If you have that kind of talent in athletics, odds are coaches already know that, or coaches are going to find that out pretty quickly. If you have that kind of talent in the arts, many universities offer the opportunity for you to submit some sort of supplement with your application where you can begin to quantify what abilities you might have. It's one thing to say on your application that you play the flute. It's another thing to be able to demonstrate that, wow, you're actually a really good flute player. Right? So students that have those kind of abilities typically will have some format where they can express that in the application process. As to legacy admission, most universities, if they're being honest, are going to tell you that they give preference to children of their alumni. You know, most universities are going to define a legacy as a mom or dad went there, but there's going to be a tremendous amount of variation for that. You know, at Vassar, we're a completely undergraduate school, so this scenario doesn't apply. But for a school like Yale or a bigger university that has graduate schools, does a parent who went to one of the graduate schools count as a legacy in the undergrad, et cetera? There's all sorts of variations that you'll need to find out from the different universities that you're looking at. Some schools take that a step further. Does the fact that you had a sibling attend that university count for anything? What about a grandparent? What about your third cousin twice removed? You know, the further you get away from your immediate family, the less likely that's going to impact anything. But for most universities, the fact that you had a direct relative attend is going to be a plus factor in the admissions process.
For University of Roehampton, we, you know, for legacy, it does have a benefit to you. If you are accepted, you automatically get a hefty scholarship from us, which is fantastic. So if you have someone in the family or a friend who attended Roehampton and you know, they're referred by them, that's wonderful. The other thing I want to mention with talents and such, I mean, for a student to come, you know, fly all the way to London to do their degree abroad, I mean, that even shows how strong you are as a student and how brave you are, and you obviously want to, you know, travel and do something different, get out of your comfort zone. So that in itself is a big plus. So the type of student that comes to Roehampton, we are already willing to go out of your comfort zone and do something different, which is, you know, it really does stand out when after you graduate.
So at a school like Purdue, we truly don't really care about legacies. We have over 500,000 living alums all over the world, and so we have a lot of legacies who apply each year. We ask for that as part of the Common App. So we'll see if your parents or brothers and sisters or anyone else had gone to the university, but it's truly not used in our review process at all. We are a Division I school in the Big Ten. If you are a recruited athlete, your application will never get read by anyone in the admissions office. It is being read by our director of admission in context with the Department of Athletics and the coaches. So if you truly are that elite Tier 1, Division I athlete, you are in literally a separate pile than everyone else. With special talents and things like that, that goes into play with institutional priorities. Right, so all of our schools year to year will be looking for different things in different students. If our tuba player from the marching band has just graduated and we need a new tuba player, and you are applying and you're the world's best tuba player, then that might give you a leg up. But the next year, we might not need a tuba player, so that doesn't come into play. We might have started a new academic program, and so we're looking for students who have shown interest into that program. That might give you a little bit of a leg up. We are always looking for money. So if you are a family who is willing to donate a building or a wing or an art museum, that's an institutional priority at a lot of different schools. But you can never know year to year what those institutional priorities are, and they will change school to school. So you never know your special talent. Is it truly a special talent nationwide, in your community, in your town, and to that school? So again, to go back to what we've said, just putting that information on the application, putting your best foot forward, whether it's through an audition, a portfolio, an interview, is really the best place to share that information with us.
So anyway, I encourage everyone to do financial aid forms, even if you assume that you are not eligible for aid. I think it's worthwhile going through those financial aid forms. It typically is 2 forms, the FAFSA and the CSS profile. Also look into colleges and universities that offer scholarships. For example, at Syracuse University, when you apply for admissions to Syracuse, you are actually automatically considered for scholarship. And scholarships can be in a range, right? The range could be anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000. Colleges and universities are getting really, really expensive. So make sure you do the best that you can to do your research about how to get scholarships if you have to apply to them. Also apply for scholarships outside. But definitely look into every website. There's something critical and very important on the websites right now, on the financial aid websites. You're gonna find something that is called Net Calculator. So you can actually go into the website, go into the Net Calculator and plug in your numbers and get a pretty clear idea of what you would have to pay for college at that particular institution. So I advise that you do that as well.
Just to let you know, in the UK, you can use FAFSA. FAFSA is accepted at most universities in the UK. We don't do state grants, but we do have merit-based scholarships at University of Binghamton. We're up to £4,000, which is roughly $7,000. And there's a wide range.
I think now is a really important time for you as families to start having the tuition conversation. So as parents, what are you willing or able to put towards tuition? Are you expecting your students to have to pay for part of their tuition? Are you comfortable taking out loans together? It's really now is the time to start having those conversations, because you would hate to get to the point where, it's down to May 1st, your senior year, and you're really struggling to have that difficult conversation of, yes, you've applied to this school and you've been admitted and it's your dream school, but we can't afford it. And what are you going to do then? So having the conversation early on, and I recognize that it can be an awkward conversation to say, well, this is what we can afford, this is what we can't afford, but starting that conversation now is going to help as you go through the next couple of years in the college search process. There are a lot of options out there for scholarships and things, and going back to the deadlines earlier with rolling admission, early action, regular decision, you also want to be mindful of any scholarship deadlines. So in addition to being mindful of what the early decision deadlines are there earlier scholarship deadlines? So generally speaking, in terms of just the college application process, I think it's a great idea to come up as a family with some sort of master calendar or some sort of organizational strategy where you can all be on the same page so that you are not nagging each other, but keeping each other accountable as you move forward with different deadlines, because it will get confusing and you don't want to miss a potential deadline for a scholarship that could have helped in the long run.
Well, I think, we're a need-based aid-only institution, so we don't offer merit aid, but we are also a need-blind institution. And these are all, you should be writing these down, because these are going to be definitions that you'll want to understand later on. So what is need-blind? Is we don't look at your ability to pay when we are offering you admission, and we're going to meet your need 100% of the time, and we are going to meet your need with scholarship and no loans. And every institution will have different policies about the way that they distribute the funds that they have available in terms of financial aid. And I do believe very strongly, because we did it with our kids, that you have to sit them down early and say, let's say they were interested in Yale, and Yale is $73,000. The cost of attendance to attend Yale is $73,000 a year. And that is direct costs and indirect costs. And those are also things, when you're doing your research associated with institutions, there's going to be various costs associated with attending an institution, be it a flight, be it books, be it the occasional pizza, be it the supplies that are not part of tuition and room and board. So you should really be thinking about the cost of attendance to any said institution that you may be interested in, and then thinking about what is that you can reasonably contribute towards your education. And yes, the free application for federal student aid form, the FAFSA form, or in certain institutions they'll ask for the CSS profile form, which is a form through the College Board that you will have to fill out. Those are things that you will find out, which you will have to do, when you will have to do it, various deadlines and such. But those will give you some ideas about what the institution expects you to contribute towards the education of your son or daughter, and what the son or daughter will have to contribute as well. Because it's always a family contribution. It's not just the mom and dad. Most institutions expect students to contribute towards the student effort side of contributing to their education. So that all comes into how much you'll pay, how much we'll offer, and hopefully those two will meet, so that there's zero at the bottom of that equation. But those are things, my colleague mentioned the net price calculator. There's also a thing on certain institutions that's called My Intuition, and I would encourage you to look at that. But those are things that you could go out to your dream schools right now, where your list may be really big, where you could plug in some numbers of, you'll have to have your incomes available to you and your tax forms in front of you. And some of these things take 30 minutes, some of these things take 5 minutes, these calculators to give you a sense of, if I were to be admitted at ABC institution, this might be what I might get for merit aid. This might be what I get for need-based aid. Will I have to take out loans? And I would also, your school counselors can also share with you places where you can find out what's the average debt that students take on while they're in college, because that's really important too. And that's also something you should think about as a family. How much debt do you want to be in when you graduate from college? What do you believe as a family is reasonable in terms of getting yourself in debt? And so I think you can find out for every institution. There's a government website. You can go out and see what is the average indebtedness of their graduates when they graduate from college. Key for you to find out that information, because no one wants to be saddled with so much debt as they're trying, as they're in their first, new, or second jobs.
But I want to briefly say that 10th graders, all you're supposed to be doing right now is getting better at school, getting better at your priorities. We do want you to, in the best world, take a practice SAT or a PSAT or a practice ACT or a PACT. See which one you like better, and next year, as a junior, start prep, okay? Then junior year timeline gets a little more in depth. Visiting colleges is something we like to stress. It takes time to organize, it takes money to go. Getting your schedules together is difficult. And I know some of you value family vacation time together, and I don't blame you for that. But the time goes by quickly. So start talking about when are good times for you to visit colleges and what will work. Summer is totally acceptable, but you're really not going to see the schools in full swing. You may want to go back to some of those schools you think you liked in the summer and see what it's like when it's really in session. I do want to ask, since I just mentioned it, can you tell us a little bit about supports you have for students that are perhaps not officially documented with a learning disability, who just need help in college, and then for those who may have an IEP or a 504 plan, how that works in your school?
Certainly, as a student, you're developing what your learning style is and the needs you have, or the needs that you need in college, right? And that comes from instructional style testing, what you're going to need to be successful. You got to make that clear to colleges. This is about finding the right fit. And at Binghamton, at a bigger public, we're going to have a lot of different students with a lot of different needs. Now, from the admission standpoint, it's not part of our review process. We're not looking at where the IEP comes into play, where you're coming from. We're looking at, is this the right academic fit? But certainly if we determine that and there are additional needs, we have a large center for that. During your selection process, you finding the right fit, that's a conversation you're going to be having with the different centers on our different campuses and what we offer for what you're looking for. And there's certainly different variations there, and I know I'm giving you a very general view of this. But colleges want to make sure, again, that you are also going to graduate from them. So there's certainly a lot of incentive on our end to make sure that you're supported so you can do well as you're doing now, and continue that trend going forward.
One of the things that I want to say to the students is, don't be afraid of adults. So you're going to find in our institutions that we have programs, offices, support services that are organized for you to come and get those supports that you need. But one of the key situations in college is that the students have to realize that your professors can become your mentors. They have office hours, they can work with you. Remember that they have a passion for what they're teaching. They have a passion. They've done a PhD, typically, right, in whatever subject they have. So your first resource should be your professors. And then we do have writing seminars, we have tutors, we have counselors, we have career counselors, we have all types of support so that you're successful not only academically, but that you also connect to what's most important before you get out of college, which is a career and internships and hopefully a job by the time you graduate, because that's what the parents are looking for, right? And you, when you've gone through all this sacrifice, what do you want at the end of the road? What you want at the end of the road is typically a really good career or a job. And so remember, we're here to support you. I think most of us probably have the same thing. If you need help writing, if you need help in math, if you need tutoring, whatever you need, our institutions are always going to make sure that you're successful. It is good for us that you become successful academically and in every way, because we do not want to lose students. So we'll do everything in the process from the moment you walk in so that you are the best possible student while you're in our institution.
At the end of junior year, we're going to ask that juniors ask 2 teachers at the most if they'll write a letter of recommendation for them for the fall, for their senior year, for their college applications. What kinds of things do you love to hear in a college recommendation from a teacher?
You know, I think, first of all, make sure you choose teachers that like you. I'm always surprised when people sort of like, well, I have to have this kind and this kind, but then we realize when we're reading the recommendation that the teacher doesn't really know them that well, but they were honored that they were asked to write the recommendation. That level of knowing the person comes through. And it's, you know, for us, teacher recommendations, I think if you asked our dean and director, they find them one of the more important pieces of the application. So choosing those people well is important. And I think what we're looking for, remember, back to that intellectual curiosity, so we are wondering how they engage with the material in the class. What do they do in terms of that material inside of class and outside of class? Because our students tend to engage with material, intellectual stuff outside of class as well. How do they play with others in the class? Do they play well with others? Are they good in groups? Do they always have to lead in groups? Are they always the first person to raise their hand and have to be the first person to speak? Or will they lay back a little bit, listen to what's happening, and then they engage and everybody goes, wow, that was really bright. Those are the kinds of kids, actually, the latter, that intrigue us more, because the smart kid who knows the answer right off the bat, fine, but maybe not so necessarily unique. And so I think those are the things that we look for. The teacher tells us that. That's how you engage in class, how you engage with your peers, how you engage in the material. Sort of gives us clues about why you're choosing to study the things that you might be studying. The teacher recommendations sort of help us know how you'll possibly, potentially, at first, engage with the material once you come to our campus.
So it's really important that you choose wisely. If you're looking at the higher tier universities in the UK, of course, they want to have a recommendation letter from an academic in the field that you're looking to study. And in that recommendation letter, it should show how you've engaged in the material and your knowledge in the material, and what they've experienced in that classroom with you.
I want to end on a really good note. So I've been doing this for 33 years, and I've never seen a bad recommendation from Mamaroneck High School. They're phenomenal, right? But one of the things, yes, I've never seen a bad one. So one of the things that you have to consider when you're looking at who you're going to select to do your recommendation is clearly what everybody has said. You know, that they can speak about, you know, how you work, do you work well in groups, are you a team player, are you curious, etc., etc. But it doesn't have to be from the teacher or the counselor or the teacher, I should say, where you're getting the A. It could be the class where you're getting a B, barely, but you're working really hard, because what the recommendation should do is should speak about your work ethic. And how is it that you actually work through that? Even if it isn't the easiest class, are you working hard? Are you giving it all your effort? So that's what you have to look into. It doesn't have to be where you're gonna get the A. It could be in a class that you may be struggling a little bit, is competitive, but also where you're working hard to get the grade that you're getting. Make sure the counselors and the teachers know you really well. If they don't know you really well, because there are a lot of students, make sure you bring them a resume, a little reminder that says, remember, you had me in English and such a year, and this is who I am, and I've done this, that, and the other. And I think you do that as a practice here, right? They all have to do something like that, because a lot of students go to teachers, and the teachers may have forgotten them already. So make sure they haven't forgotten you. That's really important.
There was a teacher here named Barney Gill who taught math, and he taught the highest level of math. And all the BC calculus kids, right? One day he came into my office, and this was a year where they gave him one section of a lower level math for kids who struggle. And he came in and he said, please, can you ask Emma to ask me to write her recommendation? I love to watch her work. She had a C average, but she was really, really trying hard and working her butt off. And he was getting kind of tired of writing letters for kids with 95 averages who would always come up to his desk and say, what's my GPA now? What do I have now? When's the next test? So it's more about how you go about high school than the number you get at the end. It's hope you take a lot from these questions and answers we had tonight. And I hope that students, it will allow you to look at school in a different way, look at yourselves in a different way, take a little time and really think. Remember, unplug. Thank you for coming. Juniors, we'll see you in May for